Hello class, and welcome to another lecture on the Minor Prophets. Today we're going to be talking about Amos. Amos was probably one of the most just ordinary, down-to-earth, average people that God called to be a prophet. He was a shepherd. Most of this book is going to deal with the issues of justice and righteousness. Now, we know that God is the author of all things. And this is what's really important about this book, is that God is the author of justice and righteousness. That so oftentimes, because of what we allow sin to do in our lives and in our culture, in our society, in our world, we allow our own definition of justice, what is right and wrong, to sort of be the most important thing, right? This goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden, right? Of Adam and Eve choosing to say, hey, this is what's right. I'm going to define what is right, what is good, and what is evil. And so this book is kind of highlight a lot of that. Like I said, Amos was a shepherd and a farmer from the place called Tekoa. This is a village just about 12 miles southeast of Jerusalem. It's a small little village. Now, so even though he was a citizen of the southern kingdom, God actually called him to go north. He heard about what was happening in the northern kingdom and a lot of the just the downfall of the kingdom there, and just kind of people doing what was right in their own eyes. And he was like, enough's enough. I'm going to leave my day job and I'm going to go up there. And God called him to do so. Amos began his ministry during the reign of Uzziah, which was a southern king, and Jeroboam II. Now, we've heard that name a number of times. Jeroboam II was like, he was pretty evil. He would definitely be in that category of dictator in our modern concept, right? He basically felt like he was untouchable because of he had really secured a strong military, and the wealthy became more wealthy, and there was one percenters, right? People that were very wealthy and a lot of people who did not have any at all. But he saw it as, I'm on my own side. Like, I've made myself my own God. And he was a devout Baal worshiper and so on. And so Amos, pretty much his call was to address the king of Jeroboam. Jeroboam has a lot of different prophets who are thrown at him. And so Amos heads off to the northern kingdom, and at the height of its military and economic prosperity under Jeroboam II. His oracles predominantly focus on God's justice, God's sense of right and wrong, God's sense of order, God's sense of moral, right? What is right, against the poor. See, the problem was with Jeroboam and the northern kingdom is that they really felt like, because their military was so strong and because their economy was so strong, that in the process of that, there were those who were really kind of just receiving the short end of the stick, so to speak, or the short straw, right? And that was the poor. That there was always people who had no voice, because having a strong military, right, involved high taxes. And who are you going to tax? Well, the poor, who already don't have anything. And so what they don't have, you're just going to take more and more away from them. And so there was this huge gap between the very, very wealthy and the very, very poor. And so Amos also speaks about idol worship, right? That you become what you worship. We've talked about that, right? And they were devout Baal worshipers. Bethel and Gilgal were the two major cities of places of worship at the time. And so he really addresses those two places. Amos's words were addressed to a people who failed to see their relationship between worship and common life. Because they were like, hey, listen, I could worship Baal and I'm still part of God's, Abraham's family, right? I'm still part of this Jewish culture. Like, I'm still a good Jew even though I worship Baal. No, they didn't make that connection. They didn't make the connection that you are what you worship. And so Amos is trying to say, no. Like, don't you see that your character is not of Yahweh? Your character is of Baal. And this is why all this is happening. realign yourself with that. Realign yourself with Yahweh, with God, the true God, and your character will change. You'll begin to actually care for and love your neighbor. And the poor will be part of your perspective. And your perspective is going to change. Now, we'll end with this. Amos's book is divided between a bunch of different oracles. And particularly, as many of the minor prophets have said before, the sin of the nation, except for Judah, is their war crimes and their ruthless, inhumane treatment of Israel. Okay, so that's the main issue. And the mistreatment and violent actions directed towards others are subject of God's judgment. And so the day of the Lord, as we've talked about before, the day of the Lord will come, not to bring salvation, but to bring judgment upon Israel. And so Amos's words are really geared towards, again, just northern Israel. It's not just a future proclamation for all the world. It's a future proclamation for just the northern kingdom of Israel, that their judgment, it will happen. So through Amos's oracles, for the most part, focus on judgment. The book ends also with hope. It's a hope of the future, that God's reign of justice will be like an ever-flowing stream, right? God's mercy and God's love will be the final answer. And so that's really where the book ends. It's not just all doom and gloom. It's not all just like, hey, get your stuff together, right? It's also about a God who says, I have the final answer. And so this is good news for those who are poor. This is good news for those who are voiceless, because God is going to be the voice for the voiceless. But here's the thing. God has called us to partner with him in that. And this is still true for us today. To say, hey, listen, I'm going to extend beyond what my circle, right, what I'm comfortable with, to actually truly love my neighbor. I'm going to see what's most important. And that's that they, like me, are loved by God. I'm going to treat them as such. And so that is the amazing book of Amos. All right, next time we're going to get into Obadiah, another maybe odd book that you don't know much about. Until the next one.